Hey, everybody. I am so glad to be back and move my microphone just up a little bit. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that was kind of an eyesore. Hey, it's great to be back. I missed you, though I did need a break. So it was good to get out of the country. I got to go to Europe for a little bit and eat lots of ice cream. Probably too much ice cream, but beautiful. Hungary is just beautiful. Budapest, what a city. If you've never been there, encourage you to go check it out. You'll really be amazed. Got to go to a Turkish bath that's older than America. And I used to live there years ago. And so I got to go back and revisit some of these things. It was really a lot of fun. So that was my little vacation, but it's good to be back with you and look forward to getting into your questions. Now, before I do, I want to let you know a few things that I think are actually kind of cool and kind of important. So let me walk you through these different things so that you can get a sense. First of all, I want to let you know about our new website. All right. So this here is our new website. Dun, 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 pretty cool. I think that's, well, you know, God's good. Anyway, this is our new website. You can check it out. We've got, you know, the teachings. We have sermon notes, the core teachings, where we're actually located, etc. And you can come down here and you can get the app. Get the app, everybody. Get the app. Did I mention you should get the app? Now, in case you're wondering, why should I get the app? One good reason is that you can put your questions right here in this chat function. And this chat function, well, it's pretty awesome because you guys can pray with one another, which I really hope you will do. I hope you'll just hang out, schmooze, talk, chat, encourage one another, ask each other questions. But if you want to submit questions for this show, I will be giving preference to people that put their questions right there. So go ahead and check that out. It's absolutely free. You can get it in the Apple Store, you know, or in the Google Play Store. The Way Congregation is what that is. So go ahead and check that out. I'm pretty excited about it, and I hope that you will be too. So that's that. Also, I want to let you know, Corrupting the Image Volume 2 is available both in my store, douglashamp.com/store, or you can get it at amazon.com. And I think you know the whole program when you go to Amazon. So you can check it out there at amazon.com as well. Pretty excited about that. I'm also working on another book with Chris Steinley, good friend of mine. It's called The Forgotten Age of Judah. All right. So if you want to go and get the pre-order Kindle, I think it's actually available, but you can go to Kindle and you can get it. We're going to have the paperback coming out shortly. So go ahead and check that out. The Forgotten Age of Judah is on Amazon as well. And guys, don't forget, I have a store on my website, douglashamp.com. You can go there, and I've actually been giving away a lot of stuff. So, you know, keep checking back because I'm giving away a lot of stuff. Even right now, there's free stuff. So go ahead and avail yourself of those resources. I hope that they'll be a blessing to you. I'm letting you know about these things because I love your questions, but sometimes they require a broader foundation than what I can give here on the show. So check out those things, and we'll leave it at that. All right. Without further ado, let's get into your questions. And I'm going to go back over to what we had there at the website or on the app with the messaging feature. And I'm going to try to give those questions. I'll give those questions the first shot here. So this is from Susan. She asked, Dr. Hamp, what about the tribe of Dan? One aspect I think is the Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49:16-18. Could it be possible that the Antichrist might come from this tribe? Well, Susan, I think it's possible that he could come from anywhere. I personally am not persuaded that the Antichrist is going to be Jewish or Israelite. I know that that is a popular teaching in some areas, and I can't say that it's impossible, but I just don't see the need for it. I don't see why this person would need to be of any kind of Jewish descent or Israelite descent. Again, it is possible, but I don't believe that the passage you're referring to in Genesis 49:16 bears any merit to that. But let's take a look at it. So Genesis 49:16. We will take a look at this. Let me make sure to share my screen so that you guys are privy to see what I'm seeing. All right, there we go. All right, good. So Genesis 49, it says, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Of course, Dan, means judge, right? So there's certainly that to be taken in mind. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider shall fall backward. All right, now, what exactly that means is kind of anybody's guess. I mean, that one is pretty tricky to try to figure that out. However, as I have in the book, right, this book right here, I actually talk about, and I'm going to show you guys on my screen really quick, what we actually found in the land. And I think this is it. I mean, that's not it, but no, hold on. That's not the one. Okay, hold on. It'll only take me a second to get to that. So coming along here. And I want to show you guys a picture of a geoglyph. This is a picture of a snake. A geoglyph, of course, is some kind of a carving that is found in the land itself. Now, I think everybody's able to see that. No, hold on. All right. This is the joy of being my own producer. I'll tell you. All right, here it is. Okay. So this right here is found about, 25, 30 miles south of Mount Hermon. This is in the land of Bashan. Now, this is not properly the land of Dan. It's pretty close to the land of Dan. This is actually in the area of Manasseh. But, it's just really interesting that we find this so close to Mount Hermon in the area of Bashan. Bashan, as I've said before, comes from the Akkadian word bashmu, and it means dragon, snakes, or snake dragon, however you want to parse that. But that's what this word actually means. Now, this is not directly related to Dan. I have to be, full disclosure here, but it is, I think, quite interesting that this is found pretty close to where Dan was hanging out. And of course, the area of the gates of Hades was in the area of Dan proper. So that is just something, some food for thought. And of course, what's interesting about the area of Dan is that they actually started further south in the beginning, and they were not happy with their location. And so then they pretty much upped everything and they moved north until they got to the area of Banias, or to the area of Caesarea Philippi, as it would later be called. So, there could be something there that he's a snake by the path. Maybe there's something to that. But again, I'm speculating. So I just want to be careful. I never want to go too much overboard when I'm speculating there. But thank you for that question, Susan. Appreciate it. All right, this is from Arnold. Asks, why were there still giants after Noah's Ark or after the flood? Thanks and shalom. Well, Arnold, great question. There were giants, it says, both in those days and afterward, when the sons of God came and took the daughters of men. So there was something going on. This is the debate between one incursion or two incursions. Again, in the new book, I actually discussed this in Corrupting the Image, Volume 2, this book right here. I discussed this, and what I put together, and again, you can take this or leave this, but what I think is very fascinating is that when we start looking at Scripture, when it talks about, it talks there about Nimrod, fascinating stuff. So in Genesis chapter 10, here we come, we got Nimrod, right? So Cush begot Nimrod, right? So he's born just a regular person. And it says he began to be a mighty one on the earth. Now, again, you could read that and say, oh, that's no big deal. But actually, there's a lot in this, and I unpack it in the book. So he began to be a Gibor. Now, Gibor does not necessarily mean that this person is a hybrid. However, when we start looking at this and how it is understood, for example, in the Septuagint, they fully understood that this was talking about him becoming a hybrid, that he became a gigas. A gigas is a giant. All right. So they just flat out say he became a giant. Whereas the Hebrew is a little bit more reserved, but the word Gibor is used to talk about the Nephilim, that they were the Giborim of old. They were the mighty men of old. And when you start looking into this history deeper, you'll find that Nimrod was Ninurta in the ancient world. Ninurta means Lord of the earth. He was known as the son of Enlil of being Satan, and that there was some kind of a symbiotic relationship going on between them. Actually, appears to be some kind of a hybrid relationship that was going on between them. So these are all really interesting clues that give us pause to say, all right, something was going on. And I don't think that God was simply impressed that Nimrod could hunt well, right? Like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. Was God up there? He's like, well, that Nimrod sure is a good shot with that bow and arrow. I don't think that's really what's going on here. In fact, again, when we go back to the ancient text, what we find is that Ninurta was known as the hunter. That was one of his major epithets, was the hunter. And he was the one that was the hero. He was the Gibor. And he's called that. He's called the hero again and again and again. So many roads take us back to this same conclusion, that we are talking about Nimrod and that there was this radical transformation. So why were there Nephilim after the flood? I would suggest that Satan did not stop. Yeah, he got pushed back. His program didn't go as he had hoped, but he simply pivoted and kept on working. And that's where I think the evidence takes us. So fascinating. All right, let's go to the next question. This is from Victor. Victor Mena Garcia says, Doug, your teaching today says that the prophet that rabbis were expecting was Moses. When they asked, are you the prophet? Moses told Israel a prophet would come who they had to obey. Isn't that Yeshua and not Moses himself? Victor, that's an excellent question. Absolutely. But if you notice in the text, they say, so are you the prophet or are you the Christ? All right, so they were expecting somebody. And when we start looking in the ancient text, we find that they fully expected not only Elijah to come, but Moses as well. All right, so Moses is considered to be the greatest of all prophets. So it's entirely possible that when they said prophet, they may have had Moses in mind, and they may have had some other prophet, a prophet like me, in mind as well. But they weren't entirely sure exactly who that would be. So fantastic question. I appreciate that. All right, let's go to Catherine. Catherine asks, hello, Pastor. I'm curious to know if our democracy comes to us from Greece. As our democracy comes to us from Greece, are we in the United States considered to be under the domain of the Prince of Greece mentioned in Daniel? Thanks for your consideration. Wow. Okay, that's a very interesting question. So our democracy does not, it comes to us in principle from Greece, but I don't know that we could make a direct link back to Greece. So I would probably say no. I'm not persuaded that we are under the Prince of Greece. Certainly, we have a lot of principles, philosophies, words, in fact, that come from Greek and from the people of Greece. No question about that. They had a huge impact, but they had this huge impact on many other cultures as well, not only the United States. So that would suggest, if that were the case, that would suggest that everything that Alexander ever conquered would be under the Prince of Greece. And now I'm not an expert in spiritual domains and exactly how they're laid out, but I get the feeling that's not how it works, because kingdoms rise up and then kingdoms are knocked down. So yeah, I would probably say no. It's hard to see into that realm completely because we just don't have enough to go on. But yeah, so my answer is no. Okay, thank you, Catherine. All right, this is from Cindy. Greetings, Pastor Doug. I am curious about Matthew 27:51 through 53. These people who arose out of their tombs at the resurrection of Jesus and appeared to many people, did they also ascend with Jesus 40 days later, or was their raising like a regeneration, that is Lazarus, and they died again? Also, is there special significance to the term Holy City used here in the NIV? I assume that refers to Jerusalem. I think Jerusalem is referred to as Holy City in Matthew 4:5. Yes. Okay, so so the Holy City is Jerusalem. I think there's little question about that. What happened to those people? We're not told. That is a very interesting question. My suggestion would be this, though, that Jesus is the first fruit of the resurrection. All right, so he's the first one to ever do it. And then, because these people rose from the dead, let's go to that text because I think it's incredibly interesting. So Matthew 27:41. Hold on, 51, excuse me. Sorry about that. 51. Okay. So it says, then I'll see, make sure I'm sharing with you guys so you can see it too. Oh, that's better. Okay, good. So he says, then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked and the rock split, and graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. All right, so this, of course, is happening as Jesus dies. Interesting. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went out into the holy city and appeared to many. Okay, so coming out of the graves after his resurrection. So the graves are opened, and the timing here is not incredibly clear, but I think we get the sense that they rose after he rose. And Jesus is the first fruit of the resurrection. So these are people that seem to have been dead for quite a while, that they were not recently dead. That is the impression that I get, but I cannot exactly prove that, but that's the impression that I get. And that they are here they're not going to die again. So they probably went up with Jesus. Now we have an interesting text, which is in Psalm 68, starting at verse 15. A mountain of God is the mountain of Bashan. A mountain of many peaks is the mountain of Bashan. Yeah, you guessed it. It's in my new book. Yes. But what's so interesting about it is it says that you have ascended on high. You've led captivity captive. You have received gifts among men, even from the rebellious, that the Lord God might dwell. All right. So this is then repeated in the book of Ephesians. Paul quotes this. He says, therefore, he says, when he ascended on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. Now this, he ascended, what does it mean? But that he also first descended into the lower parts of the earth. He who descended is also the one who ascended far above all the heavens, that he might fill all things. All right, so again, these texts are not incredibly clear, but the impression that I get based on these is that when Jesus ascended to the Father, that these people would have ascended with him. A small, select group, all right, not everybody by any means, and there's still a general resurrection for the just that is yet to be had. Again, that's just, this is a little bit of speculation. This is kind of a pet theory. So that's probably how I would answer that, but I am willing to be corrected on that. So thank you for that question, Cindy. All right, I think we have a couple more questions from the messaging on the app. Can you explain Luke 17:33-37? How does this help us understand the end of days? Okay, so Luke 17:33. Let's take a look at that. Luke 17:33. And let's see what that says. Let me share that with you. All right. So he says, even so when the Son of Man is revealed. So here's talking about all the crazy stuff that is coming. This is to some degree parallel to what we see in Matthew chapter 24. All right. So as it was in the days of Noah, so it'll be in the days of the Son of Man, they ate and they drank, etc. And then he says, whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. I tell you, in that night there will be two men in one bed. The one will be taken and the other will be left. Two women will be grinding together. The one will be taken and the other left. Two men will be in the field. The one will be taken and the other left. All right. Well, it's interesting. This here thing of two men, is it two people or is it two males? That's not entirely clear what Jesus is getting at. So I'm not sure if that's a reference to the rise in homosexuality. But I think that the key thing here is, we have a tendency to want to save ourselves, right? Look out for number one. But God's message throughout the entire Bible is to be a servant of others. And when I find myself being a servant to others and laying my life down, somehow God gives it back to me. It may not be in this life, it may be in the life to come, but there are times when it could be in this life. If I'm willing to forego my own rights, so to speak, and that I'm looking out for others, that my life will be preserved. Again, there could be a myriad of examples of how that could be fulfilled. But perhaps more germane to your question is there are some who are taken and some who are left. I get the impression that the ones that are taken are the ones that are going to go to judgment. He's going to send out his angels to gather his people, right? He's going to gather all people, right? He's going to put some into the fire and other into the barn. So, exactly who's who, but I think we're making a sense here that the people that are taken are probably the bad guys, but again, not exactly clear just based on this text alone. All right, fantastic. And this is from Matthew. Can you explain the difference between Laokia, Biokia, and Haokia, firmament, and how do flat earthers come up with the idea that planets and stars exist within this dome? Sorry, I'm vague, but they say the firmament is just a dome and Strong's refers to it as expanse. Thanks and shalom. Okay, all right, Matthew. Well, how, flat earthers come up with stuff, you'll have to ask them, because I am not a flat earther, and you'll have to ask them how they come up with their various perspectives. Sometimes I myself am quite dumbfounded as to how they come up with those various perspectives. But notice here, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was a form of void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. All right, so that gets us started here. God said, let there be light. There was light. And then he separates it. And then we have in verse 6, then God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament, divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. Okay, so he calls it, what does he call it? He calls it Shemaim. Okay, now as for your, Rakia, Biokia, so Biokia is in. All right, so Be means in. It possibly could mean on, but it's typically in, something that's inside of. Larakia, if I remember your question correctly, Larakia is to the expanse or for the expanse. And then Harakia is simply the firmament. Now, it's unfortunate that we got this word firmament from the Latin, because it really gives the wrong impression in the English. And, but we're kind of stuck with it, I suppose. So let's take a look at a few other translations. I hope that will put some things into a different perspective here. So this is the New English Translation. It says, let there be an expanse. I think that's a much better translation. The NASB, let there be an expanse. Okay, the ESV, let there be an expanse. All right, so you can see that these modern translations have come to this word firmament, and they're understanding that this is not something that is sacred. This isn't a word that we have to keep because it was in the original King James. It's not King James that we are beholden to, but to the original Hebrew text. And the word firmament is really an expanse. That is the idea. So it's this idea of stretching something out. Now, you could stretch something out and make it flat. That is where the flat earthers get the idea that the firmament is, in fact, a dome, because you could take a piece of metal and you could beat it and you could expand it, and then it could become flat. But it's not flat. That's the real essence of the word, but it's the expansion. That's the essence of the word, is expansion. So the expansion, you take an abstract noun of that, like rakia, and you have expanse. Expanse, not something that is expanded to being flat or hence curved, but something that is expanded. So take a balloon, for example, blow it up, and what do you have inside that? You have an expanse inside the balloon. And you could even suggest that outside you could have water. In fact, if you put this balloon in the water and you started blowing it up, if you had that much lung power, you would then have an expanse in the middle of the water, right? So that's the basic idea. God blew up the balloon called the heavens, and it's a really super gigantically big balloon, but it's an expanse, and we live inside that expanse. So do the birds fly in the expanse, birokia, as you were suggesting? Yes, of course. We're all in the expanse. We're in it, right? I mean, it's called space. We're inside of that. Of course, everything that we understand is inside of that, in that expanse. So that means that there are waters out beyond the edge of that expanse. Now, where are those? I don't know. I really don't know. Could it be that if we could get to the edge of the universe, wherever that is, that we'd find water at the edge of that? It's plausible, right? We're speculating, but that is what the text seems to suggest. So the expanse is the rakia. The rakia is the expanse. We live inside of that. The birds fly in that area as well. And where the flat earthers get some of their ideas, you'll have to ask them. Okay. All right. Very good. And now Joe has a question. He says, when we sleep or die the first death, are our souls conscious, or does consciousness return only upon resurrection? This question came up in my study of Ecclesiastes 9, 1 through 6. Let's take a look at that great passage, Ecclesiastes 9, 1 through 6. So he says here, so everything under the sun, also the hearts of the children of man are full in evil, madness in their hearts while they live. And after that, they go to the dead. But he who is joined with all the living has hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. And they have no reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Their love and their hate and their envy have already perished, and forever they have no more share in all that is done under the sun. All right. Well, certainly Solomon was having a lousy day. He was a little bit depressed when he said those things. So we'll just kind of keep that in mind a little bit. But it doesn't discount what he's saying by any means. So what happens to us when we die? This is, of course, one of these age-old questions. And Daniel is told to go your way and sleep. You're going to sleep, right? when Jesus is about to resurrect Lazarus, his brother or sister Martha says that I know that he'll be resurrected in the last day. In fact, before that whole thing, Jesus is saying, hey, let's go wake up Lazarus. And the disciples are like, well, Lord, if he's sleeping, he'll be okay. No, he's dead. Right? So he has to come right out and say it. So sleep could be a euphemism for being dead, or it could be in the sense that we have no consciousness whatsoever, that when we're put into the ground, we cease being conscious, and that God is only going to waken that at the time of the resurrection. So I think that is at least a very plausible theory. But here's the thing, it's not quite that simple, because we have some text a little bit this way and a little bit this way, and it could be that it's both and. Maybe there's a special group, like we suggested, those saints that rose with Jesus. I don't think they went back into the ground and are sleeping again. They seem to be awake. And now they're up there hanging out with Yeshua until the last time. But as far as the general resurrection goes, what we have in Revelation chapter 6 in the fifth seal would suggest that there is a consciousness. So you have the altar, under the altar, the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God. So obviously they're dead, and they had borne witness. They cried out with a loud voice, "O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer. So that's the whole idea of sleeping as well. So, Joe, it's hard for me to tell you exactly, that they're this way or that way. It could be that we will be conscious, but we're all relegated to being under that altar. It's not a bad existence. If you're up with God, it can't be half bad, but there's still a yearning to get the new body. And so they're resting there. Certainly their bodies are absolutely resting, but they themselves appear to be conscious as far as we can tell. So I can't give you a definitive answer. I'm sorry. I wish I could. But those are some of the key texts that deal with this question. And I think we're going to have to just kind of remain in that place of we don't maybe have all the facts on this question. Thank you. All right, let's go to your questions in the chat here. Fantastic. This is from my brother Ed. All right, Exodus 15:26, Deuteronomy 7:15, and Psalm 91:3 and 6. If this is true, and it is, should we need to worry about COVID and the like? All right. Well, let's take a look. Ed is sending us on a treasure hunt here. So we'll start with Exodus 15:26. Exodus 15:26. If you will diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God and do that which is right in his eyes and give ear to his commandments and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Amen to that. All right. And I'm supposing that the other passages are saying the similar thing. Okay. So, yeah. Well, Ed, I think it certainly is true. There's no question about it. But I think that we, as a people group, right, it's not just me, Doug, and you, Ed, but it's, we live in this thing called a society. And our society has been going in a certain direction for quite a long time. Let's take a little case study. Take the prophet Jeremiah. He seems like a pretty righteous guy, right? But did he suffer the general fate of his countrymen? Yes, he did. Now, he himself was not taken away. He wasn't killed. But the city was destroyed because of what they as a people did. And that's the same thing. Or let's back up and remember when David did the census, who suffered? The people suffered. And because of the decisions of the government, the people will suffer. And that is the same principle. And I'm not just blaming the government here. I'm blaming all of us, okay? For the last several hundred years, we Americans have been living in a certain fashion, and we are still living more or less in that fashion, possibly getting worse, I think you could argue. And so it's not just me, but it's me and us, right? Now, we are a very individualistic society here in America. We think, well, I gotta look out for just for me. I'm worried about, myself. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps and all this different cowboy type mentality. Other countries have much more of a we're all in it together mindset. And what happens to one happens to all. And we don't necessarily share that as much here in the United States. But it's really true, because what happens to us as a country will affect me and my family. So because we as a people group have been pursuing various lifestyles that are very much contrary to God's word, then we as a society, which includes me and includes you, will also face the consequences of those various choices. So when it comes to COVID, should we be worried? Well, I don't know if we should worry, but could it affect us? Yes, it most certainly could. In fact, I know of Christians that have died from the COVID disease, okay, from this whole thing. And so we believers are not we're not immune from the things that happen. If we as a society had been following what God had done, then I think we as a society would not have to be concerned about it. But that's just not the case. We've been going very much to the contrary, and so it's now affecting us. Thanks, brother. All right, let's go to Tomas Rodriguez. Hello, in the Bible, sons of Belial is mentioned several times. So what does that mean, and who is Belial, and is he another fallen angel? Thanks. All right, Tomas, Belial is simply another name for Satan. Yeah, in the book, I really go into incredible detail looking at the various names of Satan in the ancient world. So here's the thing. If you go and you try to find who is Satan in the ancient world, you're going to come up with zero. Because there was no being or God known as Satan or Lucifer in the ancient world. But once you start to dig a little bit deeper and you start making these connections, I've done the work for you so you can check it out. But you find that he was known by many names. So the word Belial, this comes from the word Baal. Baal means Lord. And of course, we know that there were many iterations of Baal, right? You had Baal Hermon, you had Baal in the other parts. And Baal was all the same guy. In fact, when Elijah is having his powwow with the 450 prophets of Baal or Baal, he's really doing battle against the god Melkart. Now, Melkart is the king of the city. He's the king of Tyre. So if you take a look at Ezekiel chapter 28, you'll find there that it's talking about the king of the city. So I went and did some digging on that, and lo and behold, this the king of the city of Tyre was known as Melkart. So Melkart just means Melech Karat. All right, so Melech means king, Karat means city. So he's the king of the city. And guess who that is? It's none other than Satan, right? That's what the Bible tells us, but that's also what ancient history tells us as well. There's also another text that is dealing with, and I got this from Amar Anus, who's out of Finland. So he's a specialist in Akkadian and Sumerian. I'm not a specialist. I'm a little bit dangerous in those two languages, but he's really an expert in those areas. And so I contacted him because I wanted to see if I was on the right track. And lo and behold, I was. It was kind of exciting. So he shared with me a text, and actually you can check it out if you go to academia.edu. He's got an amazing paper there called Ninurta. Let's see, what's the subtitle? Well, check out Ninurta, the god Ninurta. I forget the subtitle. But he talks about how there was a conscious syncretism between the god Enlil and the god Dagon. All right. And it was the ancient scribes who understood this. And what I won't get into all the details, but there's various logograms or symbols that were used for both of those gods. And so what they understood is these are the same guy, right? We're using the same symbols, even though they have different names, but the symbols are the same, proving that they are the same God. So Belial is just another iteration of Satan. And that's it. All right. Great. JD asks, what kind of judging? So this is from 2 Timothy 4:1. What kind of judging of the living dead is this? He appears and sets up kingdom at beginning of 1,000 years. But I thought the judging of living dead was after the 1,000 years. All right. JD, let's take a look at that text. First, 2 Timothy 4. Okay, so here he is. He's talking to Timothy. He says, I charge you in the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, who is to judge the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word. Be ready in season, out of season, etc. All right, so Jesus, who is the judge of the living and the dead, and by his appearing and his kingdom. All right, so he's using these things as he's charging Timothy with Jesus the judge, Jesus who's coming, and Jesus who has the kingdom. All right, so Jesus is going to judge the living and the dead. Where do we first see Jesus judge, other than when he comes back and he slays a bunch of people? But in Matthew 25, I think it's verse 37, a little too far here. So he says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And so the sheep are on the right hand, the goats, of course, are on the left. All right, so this right here is the first instance that we see of Jesus judging after he comes back. So I think Paul is referring back to this here in Matthew 25. This judging of the living and the dead. Now, I would suggest that what Paul is actually talking about in 2 Timothy is he's using this as a general description. He's not necessarily using it as a timestamp, but he's using it as a description. It's a title, an epithet to who Jesus is. All right. So if we were to see Neil Armstrong, there we go. If we were to see Neil Armstrong, we'd say, oh, the man who walked on the moon. Okay. It doesn't mean he was walking on the moon when I saw him, of course. It means that he walked on it much earlier than that. And so that is probably what he's getting at. But Jesus will indeed judge. And this judgment that we see here in Matthew 25 very much happens at the beginning of the 1,000 years. And this throne that is set up is the same throne that Jesus will judge. He will sit on that throne. In Revelation chapter 20, we see that he's also on a throne. And who is it? None other than Jesus, right? And he says, and I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, the earth and sky fled away and no place was found for them. And I have a whole teaching on this where I go into this and to show that this is not something that is a description of what is happening at this point, but it's a description of who Jesus is. When did earth when did the face, or from whose face, when did earth and heaven flee away from his face? When he came back. That is when they fled away. How do we know that? Well, Peter tells us, right? 2 Peter, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise and elements will melt with fervent heat. This is going to happen when Jesus returns. Revelation chapter 6, he says, I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon like blood. The stars fell to the earth. The sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island was moved out of its place. Well, he's taking this from Isaiah 34. Well, of course, he's getting the vision, but we also have it happening in Isaiah 34:4. All the hosts of heaven shall be dissolved. The heavens shall be rolled up like a scroll. All their hosts shall fall down as a leaf falls from the vine. All right, so when is this happening? When Jesus returns. That is when the heavens are going to flee from his face. They're not going to flee after the 1,000 years. It's already done. This whole heaven and earth fleeing from his face has already happened at the second coming. So that becomes a description, and the use of the aorist tense in that passage really strengthens that. And it shows us that this isn't something that's happening as he's describing it, but it's something that is a description of who Jesus is. Great. Another question by JD. Is there any crystal clear passage that disproves preterism? Ooh. Well, I had a debate with a guy some years ago who was a post-millennialist, but also a preterist. I don't know that there's a particular passage that's going to finally get them to say, oh, you were right. But I think it really stems to a method of interpretation that they're using. And the method of interpretation is, well, their preterists are notorious for being super literal in a couple passages. And then the rest of it, they say, oh, that's just mystical type teaching or apocalyptic, so when they come to the book of Revelation, oh, it's just apocalyptic literature. We can't take anything in there very seriously. Well, okay. So let's not take that passage. Let's go to another passage and let's see if we can figure this out. And here's what I would suggest. So if we go to Isaiah 65, I think it's verse 23. Here we go. It shall come to pass before they call, I will answer. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. The dust shall be the serpent's food. They shall not destroy in all my holy mountain. So we have this whole description, which we also have in Isaiah chapter 11. And that's a great passage because this is talking about Jesus is going to come back, right? So he's going to judge with righteousness, he will judge the poor and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. That's Paul quotes that. Righteousness shall be the belt of his loins, faithfulness the belt of his waist. The wolf shall also dwell with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. To suggest that all of those things have been fulfilled, you could ask him, are you willing to let your child go and play by the cobra's den? Do you see the young lion and the fatling sitting together? Because I sure don't. In fact, I see when lions look at fat cows, they tend to eat them. That seems to be the typical response to that. So nothing has happened in the animal kingdom that is supposed to happen. And if this is it, some people suggest, well, we're kind of in that the millennium or something. I'm very unimpressed if this is the millennium. Very depressing. Because what I read is that the animals are not going to bite me anymore. They're not going to eat each other. I'm looking forward to that. And so many other promises that we have not seen at all. Unfortunately, preterism has a pretty strong anti-Semitic bent. If you take a full preterist, who they also call consistent preterists, they say that Jesus returned on the dust clouds of the Roman army. And that happened when the Romans marched into Jerusalem and destroyed it. But Jesus is coming to save his people, not to destroy them. So I don't know if there's one particular passage. There's a lot of passages, but it really comes down to the method by which they interpret the Bible. And I don't know how to help them see the light any faster on that. Thanks, JD. All right, this is Dion. COVID shots are going to be mandatory in our workplace in September. Do you think it's okay to have it? Although I know that I'm healthy. I don't really want to get it because I got the COVID-19 virus. All right. Well, I got the shot, just so you know. I feel fine. I don't see any problem with getting it. I know people have really freaked out about this, but we've been getting vaccines for a very long time, and they've been actually quite effective at stopping some pretty nasty viruses going around. So I think it's being overdone, the whole fear thing. And then, of course, people are saying, oh, it's the mark of the beast. It's not the mark of the beast. There's just no way that it's the mark of the beast. Have we seen the abomination of desolation, as spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place? Let the reader beware, right? Jesus tells us that. When you see this thing, get out of Jerusalem. Don't go back to get your bag. Don't go back to get your clothes. Just get out as fast as you can. That's what he says to do. So we have not seen anything remotely like the abomination of desolation. Nothing. So until that happens, we do not have the mark of the beast. So the COVID vaccine is not the mark of the beast. I hope I said that emphatically enough, because it's not the mark of the beast. Goodness, I wrote a book, Corrupting the Image, Volume 1. I'm talking about the mark of the beast, right? And I go into all the details about the genetics and all this different stuff. This vaccine will not change your DNA. But Doug, don't you know that it changes it? Well, listen, every time a virus comes into you, it does something to you, right? That's why you get sick. It actually changes your DNA. Now, there's something within our bodies, which is called CRISPR-Cas9. It's a naturally occurring process by which our bodies, the genes and proteins and whatnot in our bodies, are actually scanning for viruses. And when they get a little snippet of it, they then take that snippet of the gene and they go put it into the nucleus. Why do they do that? For safekeeping. That's the library. That's the depository. And they put it in there so that if this virus ever comes back, they will then have a match and they can go and know how to fight it. It's incredible how God created the body. But viruses do change us a little bit, but they're changing our somatic cells. They're not changing our germline cells. They're not changing who we are fundamentally so that we become something other. And that's what I argued in Corrupting the Image, Volume 1. I argued that the mark of the beast is going to be a fundamental, drastic, radical change to our DNA, not just a little bit from a virus. But unfortunately, people are running with this. They're doing a whole bunch of fear mongering, and they're causing people to freak out. So I think we should stop that. I think it's very irresponsible of Christians to be doing that. I love to read science literature, and I think for the most part, probably 99.9999% of all scientists are trying to make the world a better place. Yeah, and there's that tiny small percentage that are the evil scientists somewhere. But most of them they believe at least that they're trying to make the world a better place. So it's not going to be the scientists who are trying to cook up some secret formula to turn everybody into Frankenstein. It's going to be a madman who will come along. He will then understand how the science works, and then he will use it to his own nefarious ends, that will be the mark of the beast. But we have not gotten there yet. So if you want to get the vaccine, I'd say get it. I don't see any reason that we shouldn't get it. I know people are going to blow up. I can't believe you said that, Doug. But I've actually done the research, and I've looked into viruses. I've looked into genetics, and I wrote a book on this whole thing of the mark of the beast. So I can say that as an expert, it's not the mark of the beast. Okay, I'm not an expert in the other things, but I'm an expert in the Bible, and it's not the mark of the beast. All right, so stop freaking out. All right, thank you for asking that. Very good. I'm going to keep on going. Oh, I can hardly wait to see the comments on this one. This will be great. All right, so this is from Jonathan. What is the meaning of all other sins that man commits is committed outside of the body, but whoever does sexual immorality sins against his own body? All right, well, Jonathan, it's actually pretty simple. You know, if I go and I rob a bank, the offense that I'm committing is against that bank. It's against that institution, right? So that the violation is outside of me. But when I do something on a sexual nature that is outside of the parameters that God has established, then I'm actually going to be affecting my own body. And that could result potentially in some kind of venereal disease. It could potentially result in AIDS, and on down the list, right? It may not be those things, but if you continue to live that promiscuous lifestyle, those things come up, right? And you're hurting your own body when you're sinning against, or you're sinning in that way of a sexual nature. So that's what the text is really getting at. All right, I hope that helps. Thank you. Okay. This is from Lena. If all the planets are round, how could the Earth be flat? Well, that's an excellent question, Lena. You got me. Yeah. But of course, that's for our flat Earth friends who hold to that position, which I do not. So you'll have to go ask them how they would put that all together. All right, let's get to another question. This is from Matt. When Herod when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. Question: is there any explanation that you know of that can explain how these wise men could do this? Well, Matt, there's nothing in the text that I'm aware of. However, what we do know is that they were coming from Babylon, right? These were magi from the east. So let's go back in our history. When did magi have a special encounter with somebody from the land of Judah? I know you figured it out. Daniel, of course, right? Daniel, and of course his three friends, right? And they were considered what? What were they considered? They were part of the magi. They were part of the wise guys. And in fact, they had more wisdom than everybody else. And Nebuchadnezzar was pretty impressed because he was going to kill all of the wise men because he knew that they were pulling the wool over his eyes. And he was pretty tired of that. So he's going to kill everybody. So Daniel says, hey, what's the rush? And the soldier explains it to him. And so he says, give me a time to pray. There's a God in heaven who can explain these things. And so he does. And then he's given the interpretation of the dream. Now, fast forward maybe 70 years, and we come to the end of the Babylonian kingdom as the Persians are literally marching into the city. Belshazzar is acting like a fool, and there's the writing on the wall. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin, right? You've been weighed and found wanting. And he's shaking in his boots. He probably pees his pants. And he says, okay, if anybody can decipher this, you'll be third in the kingdom. And his mother says, what's all the fuss? There's a man in the kingdom who used to serve your father. Go get him, inquire of Daniel, and he can explain this whole thing to you, right? And so Daniel does it, right? And Belshazzar says, I'll give you all this money. He says, keep your gold, let it perish with you. But here's what it says, mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. You've been weighed and found wanting. You're done. The Persians are literally already in the city. You're going to die tonight. So Daniel made a big impact on that kingdom. They understood that he was the real deal. The other guys, they were pretty much imposters. So it's not a stretch of the imagination to see how that kind of pedigree and track record and resume could make a huge impression, so much that they started looking into the signs, and they started looking into those Jewish scriptures, those Hebrew scriptures that the Jews brought with them. They're like, wait, if their God can do this, maybe we should read the other things he says. And so then they start reading the various texts, right? And they probably had been reading in the Torah, right? Where there's a star, right? Balaam sees a star. I see a star, but not yet. Maybe they were onto that whole star motif. And so they were doing things. Now, how they discovered things beyond the text, I do not know. We'll have to just assume that they were clever. They must have been clever, right? They somehow figured things out that alerted them that was the time and they were supposed to follow it. How they knew that, I don't know. Did God show up in a dream? I don't know. A lot of things are possible. But those are the clues that we get from the text. So thanks for that great question. All right, let's go to Fishy Dude. All right, I came to my walk through a friend who is Hebrew roots and seems like they're getting into Gnosticism. He's extreme flat earth truther, and I'm trying to find ways to make him think his way out. Boy, Fishy Dude, I feel for you, and I appreciate the use of the word Gnosticism. The word Gnosticism, of course, is from the Greek gnosis, which means knowledge. And, we tend to relegate Gnosticism to something that people were doing a long time ago. But really, it's easy to fall into the trap of Gnosticism because it becomes the secret knowledge that I have and you don't. We have a word for that today. It's called conspiracy theories. Now, to be fair, I don't think that every conspiracy theory is false, right? So I think some of them are true. I would be very guarded and careful about which ones, but I'm not even going to get in, I won't get into those. But understand that the allure of the conspiracy theory is exciting. How do I know? Well, I got into this. I was very much into conspiracy theories. This is a true confession right here. I was into conspiracy theories from, 2007 to 2011, somewhere in there, 2012. How did I get into it? Somebody handed me a DVD about what really happened at 9/11. And you know what? To be fair, I still have questions because Tower 7 fell 8 hours after the whole thing. And I'm like, that just doesn't add up. Okay, it's interesting, right? But what can I really do about it? And what is that information, or that knowledge that I've gained? Does it help me walk out a better life in Christ? No. Does it help me be a better father or husband? No. Does it help me lead a more godly life? No. It just gives me secret information. So understand that flat earth is not so much about the shape of the earth, but it's more that we have the insider information. We know what you don't know, which is that they, in quotes, air quotes, right? They have been lying to us about everything, and we've decoded it. And so that is really the essence of Gnosticism. And it's very enticing. You actually get a rush, okay? You get dopamine in your brain when you start reading these articles and believing these things and getting all worked up. I can't believe that they, air quotes again, lied to me about this, that, and the other. I just can't believe it. And so it's a drug. It's very addicting. So it's not so much about evidence. How do I know? Because I tried. Some years ago, I won't get into the whole story, but I was friends with one of the leaders of the flat earth movement before it went global. Yes, I'm trying to be punny. And I tried to reason with this person. I tried to bring evidence, history linguistics, science. In fact, I even suggested that I started a GoFundMe. Let's go down to Antarctica. If that really is where the dome ends, let's go find it. Let's go touch this thing. He would have nothing to do with it. Because it's not about evidence. It's not about real evidence. It's about the conspiracy. It's about Gnosticism. And that's the hard part. So I did try the evidentiary thing because I love to show evidence, but it by and large didn't work because they're not looking for that. So what I would encourage you to do is to love them. I think that's probably the best thing you can do. I mean, we've had a lot of people come through the Way congregation who believed in flat earth, and it kind of annoys me because I'm like, the earth isn't flat and the Bible doesn't teach that. But rather than breaking fellowship with people about that topic, at least with the people who are followers, I think the teachers have a different obligation to not prey on gullible people. But, the people that are being preyed on, I think what they often need is they need someone to say hello and to just give them a call and to love them and to pray with them. That's probably the best way to help them get out of it. I wish I had some magic formula that could kind of solve that. I don't, but that would be my suggestion for that. So thank you. All right, let's go to another question. All right. I think we got another question from Patty. Any thoughts on God's law about not seeing the nakedness of your sister and Abraham marrying his half-sister? Yes. Well, that's a great question, Patty. So the impression that I get, first of all, let's go and take a look at the text, right? So that is in Leviticus chapter 18. So Leviticus 18, always best to go to the text. All right, so he says, you shall not approach anyone who is near of kin to him to uncover his nakedness. So this means to have sexual relations, okay? It's not just about seeing a family member in the shower. That's not what it's talking about here. So the nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother, you shall not uncover. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of your father's wife, you shall not uncover. So don't have relations with her. Your father's nakedness. The nakedness of your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother, whether born at home or elsewhere, is their nakedness you shall not uncover. All right, so this is something you're definitely not supposed to do. Now, why would it be so wrong? Let's back up to the beginning of time, at least the beginning after Adam and Eve, right? And there were no other humans on the planet, despite what some people want to argue. But Adam and Eve were the mother and father of the whole planet. And everybody goes back to them. We are all sons or daughters of Adam and Eve, of course. So that means in the very beginning, brother and sister, right? We're getting married. What's the problem with that? The problem is at a genetic level. There's nothing morally wrong with that, but there's something genetically wrong with that. All right. And that's why it's become an absolute taboo in our society, and rightly so, that you should not marry somebody who's in your same family, because there's a much higher chance that the recessive gene, the man's recessive genes and the woman's recessive genes can become the dominant genes in their offspring, right? So both the man and the woman may be carriers of a particular disease, but because it's recessive in their genes, then it does not come up and it doesn't affect them, even though they could be carrying it. But then if they're both carrying that in their offspring, there's a much higher likelihood that those deleterious mutant genes, in this case recessive, could then become dominant, and they could have a terrible impact on the life of that child. And so that's why it's absolutely forbidden to do that. Now, back in Abraham's day, that was something that was not as bad, I guess I should say. So remember, we go from Adam and Eve, right? We have all these people intermarrying, their brother and sister, and the gene pool is still relatively unaffected at this point. This is why Adam lives to be 930 years old. I mean, he's still got some pretty strong genes. He eventually, gives up the ghost, but he's got some really strong genes, and he's going for quite a while. Then we come to the flood, and we start over with Noah and his 3 sons, and of course, their wives. So now we've got this massive bottleneck. And what you see is that shortly thereafter, the lifespans go from the 900s down to Shem lives to be like 600 and some years until we get to, 120. Well, with Abraham, of course, it's 175, but then we really continue to taper down, right? So then we get to that kind of baseline of sort of the max 120 of what Moses lived to. And then ever since then, people are just not living that long, right? Even somebody today who lives a good full life makes it to 100, 105, 113, but they're not making it beyond that, right? We're not getting those same ages we were before because there are more mutations in our human genome today than there were back then. And because Abraham was living to be 175 years old, it was still not as bad as it is today. So I would suggest that God may have tightened the requirements as time went on, that you're not supposed to marry somebody close because of the genetic problems that can result from that. But early on, when there were fewer mutations in the human genome, then it would be less of an issue. All right, that was a fun question. Let's go to Brad Myers. Hey, is this the Brad Myers from Southern California? I'm just curious, Brad. I don't know. I know a guy, Brad Myers. I'm not sure if you're the same one. Okay, can you give some solid biblical reasons why the events of Revelation 11:7 through 14 must take place chronologically after the persecution and killing of Christians for not taking the mark of the beast in Revelation 13? Ooh, this sounds like a question the Brad Myers I know might have asked, but I'm not sure. All right, that's a thoughtful question. I appreciate that. Let's go to Revelation 11 as requested, and let's see what we can get here. Okay, so let's take a look at the text. That's a really thorough question. Okay, so you got these 2 witnesses. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They're striking the earth with plagues as often as they want. And then we have this guy known as the beast. He's going to come up out of the bottomless pit. We learn more about him in Revelation 13, Revelation 17, etc. They lie around for how long? 3.5 days. All right, so there they are, 3.5 days. They're not going to allow their bodies to be put into graves. Those who dwell on the earth are going to be all excited. They're going to send gifts to each other. And then after 3.5 days, the breath of life enters them. And then the voice says, come on up here. All right. So it says, in that same hour, there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. In the earthquake, 7,000 people were killed. The rest were afraid and gave glory to God of heaven. The second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is coming quickly. All right. Then it says, and the 7th angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And then the 24 elders fall on their faces and give praise to God. Oh, I read the wrong thing. Oh, isn't that a bummer? I'm sorry, Brad. I misread your question. Let's go back to, well, I kind of gave the synopsis there. Okay, so I think I gave enough, hopefully. So let me just review the question. Can you give solid biblical reasons why the events of Revelation 7 through 14 must take place chronologically after the persecution and the killing of Christians for not taking the mark in Revelation 13. So I don't know that, I don't think I hold that. I don't know if I ever said I did. I don't think I did. But I see the two witnesses as being in the first half of what we call the 70th week of Daniel. So there will be a 7-year period. Now, the latter half is what we call the Great Tribulation. All right, that's the official name, is the Great Tribulation. That lasts 3.5 years. But the first part of this 7-year period of the 70th week of Daniel, from Daniel 9, chapter 9, is the lead up to that. And I would suggest that the two witnesses are going to be witnessing in that first 3.5 years. And they're going to be doing all these things, and they're going to be very successful. And the Antichrist, the beast, will not be able to overcome them. I mean, I think that's quite clear from the text. And then something happens where the beast is finally able to overcome them. Now, I'm documenting all of this in Corrupting the Image, Volume 3, and I'm going to show that what happens is he then becomes a hybrid. He then merges with Satan, and he becomes the beast that was, is not, and will ascend out of the abyss. And so when that happens, when this hybridization takes place, then he'll have the powers to overcome them. And when he does overcome them, then the world rejoices. They're all very excited about this. And they're like, wow, this guy's the real deal. These guys, these two witnesses were plaguing us. They were making life awful, and we hated them. Absolutely. They were telling us to repent and come back to God and whatever. We don't want to do that. And so the beast is able to overcome them. And of course, then they rise and they ascend, and there's great fear. So I don't think that those events happen after the persecution of the killing. I think those events are leading up to the persecution and the killing of Christians, which will take place in the latter 3.5 years. And that is when everyone is forced to take the mark of the beast. That's when everybody is under great persecution. That's what we see in Daniel, that the saints were given into the hand of the beast, or the little horn, for 42 months, 1,260 days. I think that is the latter half of the tribulation. So I hope that helps. If it's the Brad Myers I know, let me know. I'd love to say hi. Okay, let's keep going. Let's see. This is Jonathan. Okay, you guys are chatting. That's great. Well, hopefully I got to all the questions. Yeah, someone says don't take the vaccine. Guys, it's up to you. I'm not telling you what to do. I gave you my opinion. That's why you came to this show, is to get my opinion on things. So, have your own opinion about it. But I gave you my opinion, so there you go. All right, I got a couple more questions. Maybe I'll get to them. Let's see here. How is Anglo-Israelism different from Commonwealth theology? Ooh, that's a great question, Sean. Do appreciate that. So Anglo-Israelism, also known as British Israelism, is essentially saying that Britain and America represent Manasseh and Ephraim. And they focus a lot more on the genetic aspect, okay? So we do not do that. We're not trying to say, well, people of Britain are all part of Ephraim and the people in America are all part of Manasseh, or vice versa. We don't care. At the end of the day, I'm kind of like one of the Egyptians that came out from Egypt with the children of Israel, and I was assimilated into the nation of Israel. I became one of them, even though I'm still Egyptian, but I became part of the nation of Israel. So Commonwealth theology, those are Paul's words, of course, from Ephesians chapter 2, He's saying that you, once Gentiles, once nation people, once everybody out there, you're no longer of the nations, but you've now become part of this nation. You become part of the Commonwealth of Israel. Let's take a look at the text. I think that really deserves a little bit of attention there. So this is in Ephesians chapter 2. It says, therefore, remember that you once Gentiles, again, Gentiles is the Latin word gens, means peoples. And he says, at that time you were without Christ. Who? You Gentiles, right? You nation people. You were aliens from the Commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise. What's he talking about? The covenants of promise. Well, all the stuff in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, you were strangers to that, having no hope without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who were once far off. Now, this terminology right here is very significant because we find this in Daniel 9, Daniel 9, verse 6 it is. He says, Lord, we've blown it. We've done wickedly. We've rebelled. Lord, O Lord, righteousness belongs to you, but to us shame of face, as it is to this day, to the men of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, all Israel, those near and those far off. Where? In all the countries to which you've driven them. Oh, wow. Look at that. God drove people to these countries far off, right? So this term right here, far off, that's the same term that Paul uses in Ephesians, those who were far off, right? So you Gentiles are no longer that. You were once far off because you were in the nations, which is where God had sent the northern 10 tribes, right? He sent the northern kingdom of Israel. But now you've been brought near by the blood of Christ. He himself is our peace. Who's our? He's talking about the house of Israel and the house of Judah. This is all in our new book, The Forgotten Age of Judah. You can check it out on Amazon if you want. He's made both one. Both what? Both nations. Remember in Ezekiel chapter 37, he talks about the two sticks, right? There's one for Ephraim and there's one for Judah. You're going to put them together and they become one stick in my hand. They will not be two nations ever again. This is what the blood of Jesus did. It repaired the breach, at least legally. We still see that there's some animosity between these two groups, but there's at least legally, it has the middle wall has been broken down. Okay, so we do not, in Commonwealth theology, we do not focus on the genetic aspect of it, and we do not single out Britain and America. Okay, we're saying, look, are those people included? Sure, why not? Okay, we're all included. That's the point. We're all included, and we're really focusing on how the house of Israel and the house of Judah became two different things, and God promised that he would bring the house of Israel, that he said, you are not my people. And he said, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to betroth you to me in righteousness. That's what we're focusing on. Thanks for the question. All right, this is from Robert Boyd. Doug, question, just wondering if you have an update on the Commonwealth Bible collaboration. Robert, we are working fiercely on that. I'm sorry to say we don't have anything at this time. We're writing too many books at one time, unfortunately. But the things that we write regarding these various topics and they go into our books, we will take parts of those and we will convert those into the notes that will go into that. So then you can read the Bible and then you can see the notes that go along with that. So we'll annotate it and we'll, of course, edit them to fit that particular passage. But so, we're creating content, but not specifically for that project right now, but it's coming. So I appreciate the question. Okay. And hold on. Let's see here. All right. I think I got to most of the questions. I'm going to take one more and then we're going to call it a day. All right. Before the fall, if Adam tripped and hit his head on a rock, would he feel pain? Well, I don't know. I don't know. That's a very interesting question. But all right. We'll have to let that one just All right. I'm going to take a real question, just so you know. What do you think of the apocryphal books, Enoch, Jubilees, Jasher, Blessings from Mexico City? All right. Deco, I think the book of Enoch is a great book. The Jubilees is also an amazing book. The book of Jasher is an absolute fake. So I would stay away from that book. That's a very, very, very late book. We're talking well into the AD period. Probably medieval to maybe as late as 15, 16, even 1700. I forget the exact dates, but it's not a legitimate book. So I would stay away from the book of Jasher. The books of Enoch, etc., I think they're very valuable for filling in some of the details, for giving us at least a perspective as to what people in the Second Temple believed. Whether or not Enoch himself wrote the book of Enoch is difficult to deduce. Because it comes to us in Ethiopic. I think we do have some in Greek, but nothing in Hebrew, nothing that really has that stamp of authenticity. So that's why it's a very difficult book to kind of put your finger on it. But I think it has at least a lot of historical value. You can use it, and I've used it, to help understand what people were believing on various topics. And Brad says, I am that Brad Myers, you know. Very cool, Brad. Well, I'm so glad you tuned in. Really, it's great to have you asking questions. Send me an email, doughamp@gmail.com. So write to me, and I'd love to catch up with you. All right, guys, thank you so much. This was fun. I missed taking your questions, so thanks again. Tomorrow night, Bob Rico and I will be getting into the study of Deuteronomy. We're going to be doing a little midrash, right? So we're going to be opening up the text. A lot of fun. We have a great time doing that. And then, of course, on Thursday, we have the Prophecy Roundtable with Scott Harwell and John Haller. So I hope you guys will tune in for that. And obviously, Shabbat. Don't forget that. This coming Saturday, 10:30, be there. We'd love to have you there in person if you can. If you can't, join us online. And get the app. Get the app. You can give through it. You can ask questions through it. You can bless each other through it with prayer, questions, whatever. And it's all there. So God bless you and take care. Till next time.